Hello, Stoney fam. Welcome back to another episode. I'm super excited to get down and talk with you guys. I just toked down a very nice, delicious bowl. I'm completely blanking on what the name of the strain is, but it's very tasty. It's definitely an indica-leaning strain for sure, and heavy hitter, I will definitely say. I'm feeling all of that at once, and I did not expect it to hit all at once like this. So bear with me, guys. I might be a little bit rambling, but today, though, I will say I am going to be talking about some things that can be kind of triggering to some. So, fair warning, trigger warning, I will be talking about some topics that could possibly be triggering for some, and could possibly be somewhat also, kind of depressing. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about, I'm not going to lie, guys, but that's life. Part of life is, there's the good and then there's the bad parts of life, and if we just ignore all that other stuff and we only talk about the good stuff about life, then there's no transparency there. I feel like that's just fake, and I want to be, what I'm representing on my podcast, I don't want to just be talking about information and all of this wonderful stuff about cannabis. I also want to be talking about, not the negatives so much about cannabis, but the negatives in my life and personal things that I deal with and sometimes what other people deal with. And yeah, things that can help with that, but even when you're talking about the good things that can help with these things, I'm still going to be talking about things that kind of suck. So yeah, I just wanted to warn you guys before I get into that topic and some other topics that can be triggering. So I definitely would not want to trigger anybody. So fair warning, there is some triggers. I will be putting them also in the description below. So make sure to check that out or listen and stop listening, if this is something that you don't feel comfortable with. So I'm going to be getting kind of personal, really personal kind of on this podcast especially. I kind of want to talk about, this will be pertaining a lot with me, basically. So, but also branching off of that, I'll also be talking about some stories that I have too, that have affected other people. Well, I had to hop out for a second, and you guys heard that. I just sneak cough just came out of there. That was awful. So yeah, I've dealt with, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about some trauma. Trauma is dealt with differently by everybody. Everybody usually has their own different coping mechanisms, but all pretty much some can be similarly the same. Of course, I'm not a doctor, and I'm definitely not a therapist, psychiatrist, any of those things, so I will not be telling you what you should or shouldn't do when it comes to dealing with trauma. I will just be talking about what I do to deal with my trauma, just on that part, because I did say, I just want to make sure that's clarified. So yeah, I've experienced quite a lot of trauma throughout my existence. I didn't quite realize that, as I've gotten older, I didn't quite realize that it was trauma or anything like that until I'd gotten older. Like I talked about briefly in my last podcast, how I talked about anxiety. Well, for me, that kind of started first. I started to deal with heavy anxiety, and then there started to come along with that some bad panic attacks and PTSD episodes. I would have moments where if I would have flashbacks, things would just start happening that I'd never really dealt with before, and I had to find ways of coping with that before it either got worse or my mental and physical health got worse as well. I had to make sure that I took care of that. And when speaking about trauma, I've dealt with numerous different forms of trauma. I've witnessed assault, I've been assaulted, I've been physically assaulted, verbally abused, mentally abused, witnessed many things that a young child shouldn't, or even any human at some points of my life. So it's been very hard for me to cope with some of these things. And I'm not even going to lie, guys, sometimes lately I've even had moments where I've been kind of losing within myself and just not feeling like myself. Now, like I'd said before, cannabis has always helped me once I'd found that it did. When I was starting to learn more about the terpenes and I was learning all those different cannabinoids and all the different factors of what you're smoking and how this is going to affect you, all of those things. Learning about that really helped. And I didn't fully get this part of it, though, until I had actually experienced it for myself. So, yes, I'd used it for a lot of mental things that I've been dealing with throughout my life, and some physical ailments as well that I deal with. But I'd never personally, anytime that I dealt with any loss, like death in my life, I never really correlated cannabis exactly with it. I would still smoke, of course, when I was dealing with stuff like that or whatever traumatic that I'm going through, but I feel like it didn't help me as much as later on as it did. But back then, I didn't know all the things that I do now about cannabis, and I feel like I definitely would be smoking sometimes things that were giving me the opposite effect that I desired, and giving me that horrible anxiety or worse depression, just not anything that I was looking for. So I think that had a big reason to do why I didn't correlate that, why I didn't feel like it made me feel any better. I wasn't as reliant on it. And I say reliant, keyword, not dependent. I didn't need it to survive. Like, I could put this down and I'm not going to have withdrawals. But it helps me throughout everything in my life. So I'm not going to probably stop unless I have to. But before I really had realized the significance that cannabis was going to have on my life, I was working at a dispensary, and I was being a bud tender at this time. And there was this customer, this woman. She was not my person. I was not handling her order. I was not dealing with that. But I was just next to my coworker, dealing with her and talking alongside of her. And that would be the first time that I had ever met that woman or seen that woman before. And of course, I'm not thinking anything much of it. She's just a person handling, her own business and dealing with her own order, and that's, so I just didn't really think anything of it. And then she came in the next time that I saw her, and then she was my client that I was handling and taking care of. She'd come over, and she came back, and she had expressed to me that she had gotten this product that we carried. It was this tincture, and she said that it helped tremendously, but not with what she thought it was going to help with. So we had a very emotional and very deep conversation, and it was very sad, I will say. This was very sad, but she had said that she had bought this tincture when her family member was very sick and was hoping that this was going to help with that and help with them. Well, when they'd come back, they had been using this bottle and using this tincture that they did not really intend to even use really at all, but it was the only thing that had helped them to cope and to physically and mentally be okay enough to eat and all pretty much exist. And I can relate to that, and I'll explain why later. But yeah, their family member had passed, and it was just a very sad story. And this person was such a nice person, and no one ever deserves to go through loss, no matter if you're nice, mean, whatever. We all go through our own shit, but nobody deserves to have to go through that. So it was very sad. But I was grateful enough, though, that I was able to help with giving her a product that could help her cope with these things. And she had expressed also that she was not really an avid user, really. She didn't really use cannabis that much. She was just with her family member trying to find a solution for them. But it actually ended up helping them. Of course, that's, very super sad. But there's also, I have another story that's not sad. It's very much on the opposite of that. Or not as sad, I mean. I had gotten an email because I was, again, working for a dispensary, and I was, at this time, I would bud tend, but also do some customer service work out back and work on the computers and stuff. So I was checking emails, and we'd gotten sent one from a customer, and wrote this very lovely email expressing how much they had loved our product and how it helped them. But not only that, it helped them so much throughout their everyday life that it meant so much to them that on their wedding day, they decided to eat some of the edibles on their wedding day. And they shared that with us. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'd never heard of anyone doing that, really. Not that it's unheard of. I mean, I would want to do that on my wedding day. Probably smoke some bongs or do something. I need to be high. Like, I've thought about that once. I won't lie. I've thought about it once. I was like, what am I going to do for hours, like in a church, wherever I choose. Wherever. I've not always thought about doing it in a church. I kind of always had, like, the outdoor vibes, maybe, like, in the woods, up, like, a hill. I've kind of got it, like, implanted into my brain that I want it to be similar to, like, the Mamma Mia type of thing. I don't know, maybe lame, whatever, but I really always loved that movie and that scenes, especially, like, not exactly where they do the ceremony, but, like, how they get up that hill and how they're, like, on horses. I don't know if I'd want to be on a horse, though. But, anyway, yeah, totally just gearing off of topic completely, but yeah, it's not always going to be happy stories either, when we talk about this kind of stuff. But at the end of it, even though it was a sad story, what I just talked about, at the end of it, she had found something that really was helping her and still was helping for quite a bit. I'm not sure anymore if it does or what's going on with her. I'd since lost contact. I wish that I had still was able to contact her, but yeah. Now, kind of piggybacking a little bit on what I was talking about before with how the last story I was talking about, how this woman had lost one of her family members. I experienced something similar to that not so long after meeting with that person and after working at that place. So, almost 2 years ago, I was in a very different mindset, different place, different time, very different. Everything in my life now was completely different. And some of that is on purpose. I've tried to change every aspect of my everyday life because I don't want it to remind me at all of what my life used to be like. But then some of that I kind of don't want to change who I am either, because I part of myself anyway, because I do still love part of myself. And there's parts of myself I wish I could get back that I haven't. Or have been hard to get back anyway. So without cannabis, I feel like it would be much harder. I don't know what I could say, honestly, what my life would be like without it, because that is the one factor I have not changed. I definitely still very much smoke, and now I still paid attention to what I was smoking before, but I pay a lot more attention now. But anyway, 2 years ago, like I said, my life was different. Well, this particular day, on November 7th, wow, I'm high. Honestly, we're not going to do the dates thing. I don't want to talk about the date. It's kind of freaking me out. So, and before I get into this, with PTSD and stuff like that, people can easily get triggered by stuff. And I've been triggered a couple times throughout this week and today even when speaking of this topic. So, before I get into this too, if talking about death and talking about loss, talking about things that can be kind of depressing is something that you cannot handle listening to or do not want to listen to, definitely feel free to hop off. You're free to hop off at any point anyway, but just want to put that out there. So, I was supposed to be going to work at this time, this day anyway. I was getting ready in the morning. I woke up, going about my everyday life. At this point, though, I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and him and I were having some issues in our relationship. We were not doing very well at all. But on this day and that night beforehand, we were doing okay. We were fine. We had just slept together, not like sex, but we had just went to bed together the night before. We were fine. Said our I love yous, how that is. And then you wake up, and normally when I'd wake up, he would be smoking a cigarette or doing whatever. He'd be up before me. I would always get up later. So I wasn't really concerned when I woke up and he wasn't next to me. So I was like, whatever. I got up, did my own thing. And he was off that day. He was supposed to be. And I'm supposed to be getting ready to go to work soon. So I go to the bathroom downstairs. After spending like 10 minutes in my side room next door. I had 2 rooms. I had the bedroom that we both shared. And then I had the other room we called the blue room, which was pretty much like our hangout room. It had another bed in there as well, but it was just really pretty much like a hangout room where we would keep all of our things. More like a storage area and a gaming area, but whatever, that doesn't matter. So, like I said, I went to go downstairs and I went to try to use the bathroom, and I noticed that the bathroom was occupied. At the time, I lived with my boyfriend, and I had also shared the house with my landlord. It was like a shared family house, so he